No action RPG in history has ever gone through as many post-release redesigns as Diablo 3. In this video, we will be talking about what Diablo 3 did right, but mostly what it did wrong. Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Time is but a window. Today we're going to be talking about Diablo 3. Now, I have a long history with the Diablo series, starting with the release of Diablo 1. Slow and steady, with a horror-based atmosphere, its formula was much different than the action RPGs we see today. It had 3 classes, and each of which was able to learn any skill and wear any piece of armor, given it could meet the stat requirements. Then Diablo 2 came and changed the system, making each class have set skills they could learn with branching trees where you could choose, mix, and match. It wouldn't be until way later that they would add synergies. Still though, equipping remained unchanged, with each class being able to wear any weapon or armor given they met the requirements. That is, until the expansion where they added class-only items. The lead designer of Diablo 1 said the change was made because in the first game people would make useless builds for their class, and the system didn't guide them well enough. This oversimplification to make things easier for players would continue to be streamlined for the release of Diablo 3. Alright, enough wasting your time explaining things, let's get into this. Now I do want to make sure everyone knows I only played Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 in hardcore mode, which means your character only gets 1 life. If they die, they're dead forever. So due to the way the mechanics of permadeath work, this will reflect on my opinion on things like the auction house and resurrection skills. So first up, let's talk about potions. Diablo 1 had the best potion system by far. You could get 2 different potions, one of which would refill 66% of your health, the other, a full potion, would fill up your health all the way. This repeated for mana potions and also rejuvenation potions. Now Diablo 2 made potions have limits on total HP refilled. Diablo 3 originally started with this system from Diablo 2, but then implemented a system which had you get one infinitely refilling 66% health potion. I would have liked to see a system where you still had to buy the potions, but could either buy a 66% or 100% like Diablo 1. Next up, we have player stats. I really hate how they remove the choice, no matter how arbitrary, to actually build your character the way you wanted them. Sure, I mean, you get Paragon points towards the end game after you've hit max level, but I mean when you're actually leveling up your character in the early game. For example, in Diablo 2 Classic, I once found this minus 40% to requirements, 340 damage lance. So with a clever arrangement of items, I only had to put 10 points into strength and the rest into vitality, and I had over 4,000 health points. This is about double what an average barbarian at level 80 had. This would end up giving me a massive advantage in dueling, and it took quite a while for people to figure out ways to play against it. Now, while we're on the subject of stats, I want to say that Paragon levels were a brilliant idea. Diablo 3 definitely did this right. I always felt like it was kind of stupid to have a hard level cap where you couldn't go past level 99 in Diablo 2 or level 50 in Diablo 1. But let's get back to what Diablo 3 screwed up on. One thing Diablo 3 majorly screwed up on was their item stats. In my opinion, Diablo 2 Classic was the best example of item randomization for an action RPG. Not only did it scale well with monster level, but even though at higher levels not all items were scaled to your level, you would find enough rares to make it fun. Diablo 3 eventually tried to streamline this, but overcompensated and made it more for the instant gratification crowd. Even item randomization just doesn't feel as well done on rares and gives too much focus on legendaries. And this is a problem because all legendary items have a lore behind them, a mythos behind them. Diablo's Lance or Frostburn Gauntlets. You know, that way you can tell what they are. They're items that should have very similar stats to each other if they have the same name, because they are that particular item from the mythos of the Diablo universe. Though I can't really blame Diablo 3 for that, as it kind of started heading towards that way in the expansion for Diablo 2. That brings up another problem I have with legendary items, which is they are the definitive best items in the game. There is no chance that the best legendary item will be worse than the best rare item. And I think rare should have the potential to actually be better. It just makes sense. Even though there's a very, very minuscule probability of it, they should have the chance to be better than any possible legendary because they're unknown. Alright, well, now that we've talked about that, let's talk about something that would have directly affected, and that's the auction house. The first thing on the subject I want to say is that a real money auction house is a stupid idea and shouldn't be in any game. The second part of this is that I think that the auction house was a brilliant idea. The bad part comes from 1. Softcore players who stack trillions of gold and 2, a player shared bank account. Basically, this causes a crazy amount of inflation. Still though, the auction house was a fun feature that if implemented correctly could have worked, especially for hardcore due to death and rebuilding, which causes players to spend their resources to level up again. This could also work in softcore if there was a gold tax for death, though the tax would have to be comparable to what the hardcore players would have to spend on rebuilding. Now let's get on to my biggest pet peeve about Diablo 3, difficulty levels. In Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, you had 3 difficulty levels: Normal, Nightmare, and Hell, each of which unlocked after playing through the entire game. Really, there weren't so much difficulty levels as much as expansions to the game. This would extend the monster levels. So for example, let's say that the last monster on the normal difficulty was a level 30. The first monster on the next difficulty would start where that one left off, at level 30 or level 31. Diablo 3 originally had this system followed by a 4th difficulty level known as Inferno, which I personally loved how ridiculous Inferno was as a hardcore player. The problem was I had to play through the entire game 4 times, and that was tedious. Of course, this also meant that trying to get up to Inferno again took a lot of time if you did die in hardcore. And because of this, there were only 2 players able to beat the insane difficulty of Inferno before it was drastically nerfed. Their names will always be remembered: Kriparian and Crippy. I personally feel it should have never been nerfed because it was the ultimate challenge. It was something that everyone was trying to do, everyone was looking forward to, and everyone wanted to be the first to do it. And even if you weren't the first to do it, just accomplishing it was a feat in itself. Eventually, this was completely reworked and completely changed to the system we have today, which allows you to set and change your difficulty at will. This seems to cater more for just magic finding than actual challenge. The biggest problem with this is that beating the game to completion no longer feels like a challenge. This takes away a large aspect that made Diablo 3 hardcore fun. Now it's just a loot simulator. Now while this might really work well for a lot of the softcore players who really just are in it just to find items, they're not really there for any kind of challenge. It doesn't work well for the hardcore community. And there's really nothing there to hold my interest and cause me to try to push and beat the next challenge anymore. I know what you're thinking. What about Torment level 56,000? Well, let's be honest guys, with Torment levels and Paragon systems, you can just continue to level up your Paragons, getting better items as you can, and your Paragon level will keep increasing and you can keep getting more and more powerful until you can eventually take down those Torment levels. This puts more emphasis on being patient and grinding things out than actually challenging yourself. Another thing that just came to me, which is something that used to be a large staple of the original Diablo and Diablo 2, is that there was a big focus on beating bosses. But in Diablo 3 there's a lot more focus on champions, which I felt was a big mistake, and bosses just don't seem as satisfying. I think that's mostly due to the loot they dropped. If you remember killing bosses in Diablo 2 or Diablo 1, they would drop some pretty incredible stuff. And to be honest, I think that boss fights should also be the hardest fights. They should be a lot more difficult than champions just because of the hierarchy of being a boss. Because let's be honest, back in the days when champions could have invulnerable minions, you're just like, why is this guy not like leading the entire act? But I don't want to sound like I'm just down against Diablo 3. They did a couple things right, as I had mentioned a few things earlier, and one really big thing they did right was the skills. And when I say that, I mean that the skill bar itself, allowing you to have 4 chosen skills on 1, 2, 3, and 4 instead of potions, and a left click and a right click, makes it so that you can be so much more dynamic in a fight than you could back in Diablo 2, where you had to press F5, F6, F3 to change your skill on the right mouse button or on the left mouse button, and you only really got 2 skills to work with, or even Diablo 1, which limited even farther. Anyways guys, that's about it for this discussion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What would you have changed? And have a great day. I'll see you guys around.